Welcome to The Pod, a podcast for women in healthcare leadership, a heartfelt space where women executives in healthcare and their allies unite to support and uplift each other with personal stories that inspire positive change, nurture optimistic mindsets, and celebrate diverse perspectives. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Woods. For what is done or learned by one class of women becomes, by virtue of their common womanhood, the property of all women. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to graduate medical school in the United States. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell understood something that orcapods have practiced for a millennia, and that is what one carries forward, the whole community inherits. The matrilineal pod does not hoard knowledge or keep its strongest members isolated. It travels together, communicates over impossible distances, and ensures that no member navigates the deep alone. Our guest today has also built a community for women professionals because she recognized that the singular and painful loneliness Blackwell described in 1860 has not entirely disappeared. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to find your pod and why building one may be the most important thing a woman physician can do. Dr. Kimberly Singh is a board-certified plastic surgeon based in Atlanta, Georgia, where she specializes in breast and body surgery, high BMI abdominoplasty, gender-affirming top surgery, and labiaplasty. She trained as a biomedical engineer at Columbia University, earned her medical degree from Emory University, and then stayed on at Emory to finish her plastic surgery fellowship at one of the most respected programs in the country. What makes Dr. Singh remarkable is not only what she does in the operating room, it's what she does for the women around her. Rooted in her belief that every body deserves respect, she has built a community for women professionals who all too often find themselves navigating the male-dominated specialties in isolation. Today, we're going to talk about that isolation and about the power of building your pod. Kimberly, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Kristen. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so delighted to have this conversation. And I thought we'd kick it off by talking about this group of women that you put together to create community. So what were you feeling and what were you seeing that prompted you to put this group together?
So it was about a little over a year ago when I, like many, read Melinda French now, her book, The Moment of Lift. And it was at a pivotal point in my life. I had just lost my father and, just kind of dealing with some deeper, soul searching kind of experiences that life often throws at you. But I was reading that book and I was so mesmerized and so taken aback by her work, not only in terms of her philanthropy, but by the observations that she made in, her work in Africa, especially in dealing with women and how women really come together and how it is really in our nature to come together, much like, your description in the beginning of the whales. It is, I believe, our innate affection for each other as women that kind of gets swallowed, right, in all of the competitiveness and the things that sort of society puts on us, I think, as women. And we're so far removed from that collective. But I believe it is very much a part of being a woman, is to connect with other women. And so in any case, so I read this book, I was inspired. I was speaking to my amazing nurse practitioner, Maria, who works with me in my office, about it. And she was like, oh my gosh, I want to read it. So she read it. And we were like, we should do something. Like, let's form a group of women who sort of like need this, who need community. And so we enlisted the help of another friend whose name is Olive, who is a somatic healer. So sort of deals with like all of these things that are a little less tangible in my world, but so interesting and important. And so the three of us sort of contacted our friends and even really just people who we thought needed this in our lives that we come in contact with. And so therein we formed a group called Women Rising, and we meet once a month, and it's been really great. It's I think I've been in practice for 15 years, and it's fun to do something new and different than your daily grind.
Absolutely. And this brings me to medicine. That we're both physicians.
Yeah.
And when I was in medical school, my medical class was 50% women, which was one of the first times that happened. But then plastics, I went into family medicine where there were more women in that sector. You went into plastic surgery, which is still dominated by males. They're, I think in the American Society for Plastic Surgeons, only 1 in 5 members is a female, even though there are more women now graduating in plastic surgery. I think the ratio I read was 50-50 now for graduates.
Wow, that's impressive. I love hearing that. Yeah.
But so long intro into that. You went into a specialty dominated by men, and you mentioned earlier that competitiveness too, medical school and then surgery on top of that, and plastic surgery fellowship on top of that. It's very competitive. What did that environment teach you about yourself, and what did it cost you?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like I started this sort of being the only woman in the room thing really early. I studied you mentioned that I studied biomedical engineering as an undergrad. And that was sort of like the first situation for me where I was like, oh, wow, I am like the only girl in the room here. And so I guess, and then going into med school from there, like as you mentioned, like there were tons of women, it was about 50-50 in my med school class, I would say as well. And so leading into surgery, Emory, so I did an integrated plastics program at Emory, meaning I had to do 3 years of general surgery. And then I got into my plastic surgery fellowship for the last 3 years of a 6-year program. But those first 3 years were pretty grueling. And, I think the way we were taught, I think our generation, and I think the generations to come are doing a much better job than us. But I think we were just told to put our head down, and not be small, not bring a lot of attention to the fact that you are a woman and like you are different. Just do what the guys did. Don't raise a ruckus. That was sort of the mantra, to be very honest, when I was going through. And it helped, I survived it. When I look back on those days though, man, I wish I had the knowledge that I do now, or the confidence perhaps that I do now, that, I think women bring such a different perspective, and it's not better or worse. It's just different. And I think allowing everyone to just be themselves makes any organization, whether it's residency class or a practice, better. I don't know if I completely answered your question, but.
Oh yeah. And actually it created another question, because you said something powerful about that oftentimes women in medicine or in male-dominated careers or in leadership, the C-suite is still dominated by men. We think we have to mimic those behaviors because there aren't a lot of women mentors modeling what it looks like to be a woman leader or a woman professional. And one of the things we lose is our warmth and our ability for affiliation, community, but also our intuition. And so what that brings me to is you have a somatic healer as part of your women's group. And I love that. I think it brings back some of this power of intuition that we stop listening to sometimes. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that piece.
Yeah. And I think we always know, right? Like, even when you're going through these harder, difficult times, you kind of know what is right. We just, you sort of just bottle it up and try to get through the day, right? Get through the next surgery, get through the next rotation. But I think in our group, Olive, who is a somatic healer, what she is really bringing to the group, which is so powerful, is this idea that women know, like, you just have, if you really listen to yourself, if you really, really listen, if you're able to cancel out all the noise, we have a way of knowing and coming together as a group and really healing each other, right? If you take away the competition, all the crazy things that we as women are sort of taught to layer on to ourselves. Is this person, richer than me? Is she more attractive than me? Is she thinner than me? All of these insane sort of, like layers of armor that we put on that really takes so much work to just chisel away. But when we're able to do so, I think really something beautiful is at the core of all of us. And I think when we're able to let down our guard and let other women in and be vulnerable with each other, which is really the core of our group, I think really powerful things happen. I leave the group feeling like my cup is so filled and also feeling that, we're not alone. Right. I think a lot of us, are in this situation where, I don't know about you, but in my social, I have 2 children, and, in my social circles with my friends, I don't encounter a lot of other women who are in the exact same boat as me, which is perfectly fine. And mine is not better than theirs, but it creates a situation where you're sort of, you're like, am I the only, I feel like I'm the only one on this ship. Right. And it's hard to relate. And I think when you're able to just kind of deconstruct all of the labels of yourself, it really allows you to connect with other women and not just other women. I think just everyone in your life, your partner, your children, your family.
Yeah. That resonates with me so much. I was thinking about my own experience. I have 3 children, and like yours, they play soccer. And,
yeah, awesome.
So, you do the soccer circuit where your friends become the parents of the other
100%. Yes, and your whole social circle.
Totally. And like you, sometimes I felt kind of isolated. I was the working partner in my marriage. And so my husband stayed home with our kids, and I worked full time in a really busy job. I delivered babies. I had my clinical practice, and I still felt at times the pressure to also show up as the mom. And so missing school events sometimes, or being late to a game because I was, leaving OB or whatever.
Yeah.
It could feel isolating. So I love that you're talking about, finding like women, but it's that social pressure too that we take on as women to feel like we have to do it all.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, you were saying that, and I remember my youngest son, when he was in pre-K, I remember they did this thing at his school where, like, I don't even remember what the theme was, but the idea was like to make, I don't know, a Halloween sort of themed food for a party. And, normally I would just buy something right at the store and bring it. And his teacher at the time kind of like threw out like the guilt that we do to each other, right? Sometimes as women, which is so yucky. But she was like, well, all the other mothers are making something, from scratch. And I of course, immediately was like, okay, well, crap, I guess I have to do that too. And of course I had no time to do it. So I'm up until 2 a.m. the night before, like making like, I don't know, spiders out of celery and peanut butter and raisins. And my husband's like, what are you doing? And I remember like, I wasn't having fun. I wasn't doing it with my child. Like there was no benefit to this whatsoever, other than me walking into school with him the next day and handing this horrible recreation of spider webs or something to this teacher who just made me feel vulnerable, right? And it's sort of this ridiculous situation where you're like, why did I do this? Why did I not, sort of just be a little bit more in tune with myself and to be like, yeah, actually, sorry, I can't actually spend 4 hours doing this. I'm going to go to Publix and get some Halloween cookies and that will be fine. Just sort of giving ourselves this grace where we don't have to be everything all at once.
Absolutely. And I think that's what your group does, right? You give each other grace and you model this ability to be vulnerable and how to model that for other people when we're feeling that pressure. It's okay to say, I can't do it all.
Right.
So here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I can offer.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's just so helpful, and I think it's not just working moms. I think all of us feel this way. There's so much pressure on women, whether you work at home or you work outside the home. It's just, there's so much pressure on us all the time to be perfect, to look perfect, for our kids to be perfect, for everything to be figured out. And I don't know, that's just not fun. It's just not fun for me, at least anymore, to think like that.
So this is a really fun little side note. My husband and I just went and saw Anne Juliet, the off-Broadway musical. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I have. I have not seen it, but yeah.
I highly recommend it because it gets to the core theme that we're talking about, that it's okay to be yourself and especially as a woman to feel empowered, to stand up and say, this isn't what I want, but this is. And so you champion body positivity and transgender rights and women empowerment every single day through your surgical practice and now through community building as well. What do you want our next generation of women physicians to inherit that our generation had to fight for?
So I think a lot of it, I would say just having a voice. I think just having a voice and understanding that there was this idea that was sort of dying off when I went through, but it was still palpable of that, you mentioned mentors. So I don't know about you, but I had like zero mentors. There was not a single female attending on faculty when I, was a medical student deciding plastics. When I came to plastics, there was sort of a couple of women who like weaved in and out. But the main core faculty were and actually still are, mainly men. And I think that we all thought we had to do it a certain way. And that if you weren't all in, then you weren't committed enough. And if you weren't committed enough, then you weren't worthy enough to be in the room. You didn't have a seat at the table. And so I think that translated, for me, that translated into like, I had my oldest son while I was a resident, which was a little bonkers. And, it meant like, I felt like I needed to get right back to residency. I had my second child when I was just starting my practice. And I'm not joking when I say I took 6 days off. And back then I felt like that was like a badge of honor, like that I was so cool and strong and look at me, I'm back in the operating room 6 days after I had a baby. I look back at that woman and I feel so bad for her, like that I felt like I needed to do that to prove what, when all I really wanted to do at that moment is to be home with my baby, So I think women today who are coming through, women physicians, I think they understand that they can have boundaries and set appropriate limitations on what they are willing to do and what they aren't. And I think that for me, I didn't know until very recently that I had the ability to do that. And so I think they are headed to a much better place than where I started from.
Yeah. What a powerful, powerful story. It reminds me of a story that, I heard recently in a group of physicians, and how the women in the group were the most difficult on each other when someone took maternity leave. And they were the least likely to give that woman compensation or a break
Wow.
for the missed productivity. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to model what you said, and that is that being a mother is important, and respecting our bodies and respecting that important bond is as important as getting back into the OR just as fast as you can, or even more important, and that we have to take time for that and to honor our values and our role in family.
Well, I think it's also, not to get overly philosophical on a bigger level, but like, I also think it's sort of a cultural, it's sort of where does our culture, what kind of importance does our culture place on women, right? And women, we are also, many of us are also mothers, right? And so we say that we're a society that values children and family, but we don't circle back to that and actually practice what we're preaching. So if you want women to be in the boardroom, in the operating room, wherever, in the C-suite, then we have to assume that at least some of those women are also going to be mothers, and on the flip side are also going to be caretakers. I in my generation, where most of myself and my friends are now, we're also, we're dealing with kids, but we're also dealing with aging parents. There's this whole caregiver role that falls on women, good or bad, whatever your thoughts are about this. But I think it is sort of innate to what we do. And there has to be some give, right? Like there has to be a give that allows some time for that very important process to happen, right? Without impunity for lost wages or time off. Like we have to decide as a society whether or not we're going to value the work outside of the paycheck that women do for our society, for our parents, for our children, and for our community. And until that happens, I think we as women are still going to feel very, very torn to be all things to all people all the time. So I'm hoping that this next generation will figure that out for us, because I don't think we've done the best job figuring it out so far.
Well said. And so, Kimberly, the pod is about making waves, and that's women amplifying voice and elevating success. So if you could leave our listeners with one challenge or call to action to advance our collective success in healthcare leadership, but even more broadly in just societal leadership, what would that call to action be?
I think it would be to slow down, and the next woman that you encounter, whether it's a friend, a sister, whatever, a coworker, is to try to think of that person as a broader human being than just the role that you are knowing them the best for. So, in the office, right? You see I run my own practice. I have an amazing partner, but the two of us run a practice together. And we have an all-female staff. And, Yes. Is it annoying when my assistant says her child is sick and she can't come to the office? Of course it is. It throws off the whole day, etc. But I try to think, wow, I'm really happy that I have the opportunity to say, hey, Amber, take the day off, go be with your son. I hope he feels better. Like, I love, and it's annoying, don't get me wrong, it makes my day harder. But I love that I have the power and the role to give compassion to other women. And I think if we could each do that in whatever facet of life you're in, I think that's how we move it forward. I think it's these small little gestures that make those big waves that you're talking about.
So well said. A good friend of mine talks about the micro moments of compassion. And it's what you just described, taking that one moment to say, yes, this is going to be a difficult day, and you're staying home to care for your son is the most important thing. So we'll get through it together.
Yeah. And you do. Like, there's really, the world does not end, you know.
Thank you for this conversation, Kimberly. This has been an absolute treat. Thank you for being on the pod.
Thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
And we're going to leave our listeners with a few questions for reflection. So Dr. Blackwell reminds us that what one woman learns becomes the property of all women. So think about the knowledge, experience, and hard-won wisdom that you're carrying right now. Who in your community is waiting for exactly what you have to offer? And what's one concrete step you can take this week to share it? And the second question is, Dr. Singh built a community because she understood that connection is not a luxury for women in medicine, it's a professional necessity. So if you do not yet have a pod of women who know your name, your work, your worth, consider this an invitation to build that community. Who's the first woman that you're going to reach out to? Thank you for listening to today's episode of the pod. I invite you to join our pod every month as we empower one another, fostering a world where women in healthcare leadership thrive.